This is not just a story about a woman. It's a cry for freedom, a voice raised against injustice, and the journey of a heart that refused to be broken. Based on Mary Wollstonecraft's powerful novel, this is the story of Maria, or The Wrongs of Woman, a tale of love, loss, and the courage to fight against a cruel world. In a cold and silent room, Maria sat alone, trying to bring her scattered thoughts together. The shock of betrayal had shaken her so deeply that for 2 days she could neither think nor move. She was imprisoned in a house meant for the insane, placed there by her own husband. Her mind drifted again and again to her baby, her little daughter who had been torn from her arms. She remembered the first smile, the soft fingers upon her breast, the warm breath of life that had given her a reason to live. Now that child might be crying in vain, or perhaps was already lost forever. Maria's heart broke at the thought, yet even through the pain she decided not to give up. She must survive, she must escape, she must find her child. The walls around her were old and damp, part of a decaying mansion repaired only enough to hold its prisoners. From her small barred window she could see a desolate garden and broken stones piled in neglect. She looked out for hours, thinking of freedom and of revenge against the man who had destroyed her peace. A heavy-footed woman entered the cell. Her name was Jemima. She was the keeper assigned to watch Maria. With firm voice she ordered her to eat, saying that all the ladies who refused food were mad. Maria answered calmly that she was not insane, only grieving. Jemima studied her face, half believing, half suspicious. Maria begged her to come often, promising that time would prove her sanity. Something in Maria's dignity touched the woman. Jemima had suffered much herself, and though years of cruelty had hardened her heart, she could still feel the pain of another human being. When she learned that Maria's baby had been taken from her, a forgotten tenderness awoke within her. She decided to make Maria's life a little less miserable. Days passed. Jemima brought her books, paper, and ink. Maria began to write the story of her life. She wrote for her child, hoping that one day her daughter would read the truth and know that her mother had been wronged, not mad. Writing gave her strength. It turned despair into purpose and reminded her that she was still a thinking, feeling soul. When Maria was not writing, she looked through the bars at the other prisoners walking in the garden. Their faces showed the ruins of human reason, and she wondered what sorrow had brought each of them there. Some sang fragments of songs, some laughed wildly, others stared into nothingness. To witness them was to see the soul itself decayed. Jemima sometimes allowed Maria to walk with her along the narrow passages at evening. The screams of the truly insane echoed through the halls, but these two women found brief comfort in each other's company. Maria learned that Jemima had been cast out by society, unloved and unprotected since birth. It was the first spark of friendship either of them had known in years. One day Jemima brought a parcel of books borrowed from another prisoner, a man kept in another wing of the house. Among the pages of Dryden and Milton, Maria discovered notes written in the margin. The handwriting was strong and intelligent, filled with thoughts about freedom, justice, and the condition of mankind. The words stirred her heart. Whoever had written them was not mad. Jemima told her that the man's name was Henry Darnford. He was about 33 years old, watched constantly by 2 keepers, yet he behaved calmly. Maria wondered who he was and why he had been locked away. Soon she found a slip of paper hidden between the pages of a book. It said, "Whoever you are who share my fate, accept my sincere commiseration. I would offer protection, but that privilege is denied me. I will remember you, and I will seek to know why you are here. Henry Darnford." Maria felt her heart beat for the first time in months. She answered his note, and Jemima secretly carried the letters between them. Their hidden correspondence became the light of each day. Through words they shared their suffering, their thoughts, and the small flame of hope that still survived in both. Weeks later Jemima, persuaded by compassion, allowed Darnford to visit Maria's room. When he entered, his eyes showed both surprise and pity. He took her hand gently and said that fate had brought them together again, for he had once rescued her in a former incident of distress. They spoke little at first, yet in their silence understanding grew. In the following meetings Darnford told her his own story. Born to wealthy but careless parents, he had been left without affection and wasted his youth in pleasure. He later became a soldier and went to America during the war, where he was wounded and taken prisoner. There he learned to think deeply and to value liberty. After the war he tried to settle in the new land, but restless and disappointed, he returned to England, only to be kidnapped and confined in this house without reason. Maria listened with sympathy and trust. Between them affection quickly grew. In that place of despair they discovered the only comfort left to human beings, the power to love and to be understood. Their conversations, once cautious, became tender. A look, a touch of the hand, carried more meaning than words. One evening, when Jemima left them for a moment, Darnford gently drew Maria close. She did not resist. Their hearts spoke silently, and in that instant each knew that life still held something worth living for. Afterward Jemima returned and, moved by what she saw, began to tell her own tale. She spoke of her childhood without love, of being beaten and despised, of serving cruel masters, and of being violated and cast into misery. She had been born outside marriage, hated for it, and had never known a mother's affection. Through poverty and shame she had learned to survive without kindness. Maria listened with tears. She realized that Jemima's hardness was only the armor of a wounded spirit. Between the three of them, Maria, Darnford, and Jemima, a bond formed inside that dreadful house, a bond of compassion stronger than the walls that held them. For Maria, the prison no longer felt entirely like a tomb. She had found friendship, she had found love, and she had found purpose. Yet she knew that freedom was still far away, and that the world outside was no less cruel than the one within. The story of their struggle, their love, and their search for justice was only beginning. Days in the asylum passed slowly, but inside Maria's heart, life had begun to stir again. She now had two friends, Jemima, who softened from bitterness into kindness, and Darnford, whose letters and words gave her new strength. Yet the prison walls still held her body, and society's cruelty still chained her fate. Maria continued to write, describing her past life for her daughter. In these writings she remembered her youth, her marriage, and how her spirit had been crushed under the weight of a selfish husband. She had once dreamed of love and companionship, but her marriage had only brought her servitude. Her husband George Venables had disguised greed and cruelty under the mask of charm. Soon after their wedding, he wasted her fortune and sought pleasure with other women. When she protested, he called her insane and confined her to silence. Maria wrote not to complain but to understand. She believed that every woman who suffered as she did was not just a victim of a man, but of a system that allowed men to rule as masters. She wanted her daughter to know the truth, that love built on respect and reason was the only form of happiness worth seeking. Her friendship with Darnford deepened. Through their secret meetings, they found in each other the reflection of what they had both lost: trust, freedom, and affection. They spoke of philosophy, of justice, of hope beyond the prison walls. And slowly they began to plan their escape. Maria knew that Jemima might be their only chance. The woman had access to the keys and understood the routines of the guards. But Jemima's fear of losing her job kept her from risking too much. Maria waited, knowing that patience was her only weapon. One night, during a violent storm, Darnford was moved to another part of the asylum. Maria waited for days without hearing from him. Her heart grew sick with worry. She imagined him dead, beaten, or taken away forever. The silence was unbearable. At last, Jemima brought her a new letter. Darnford was alive, but guarded more strictly. He wrote that he could not bear the walls any longer and that he would risk his life to escape. Maria begged Jemima to help, but Jemima hesitated, torn between pity and fear. Weeks later, news spread through the asylum. A fire had broken out in one of the wings. Amid the chaos, Darnford managed to escape. Maria's heart filled with both joy and terror. She was still trapped, but now she had hope that he might find a way to free her. Time passed, and one morning Jemima came into her room pale and trembling. She whispered that Darnford had sent a message from outside. He had reached safety and was planning her release. Jemima agreed to help. That night, the key turned quietly in Maria's door. Wrapped in a cloak, she followed Jemima through the dark corridors and out into the night air. For the first time in many months, Maria breathed freedom. The stars above seemed to welcome her. She and Jemima fled together to a small lodging that Darnford had arranged. There Maria saw him again. Their reunion was silent and full of tears. For the first time since her imprisonment, she felt human again. They lived quietly for a while, hiding from the world. Maria and Darnford shared both joy and anxiety. Their love grew stronger, but danger always lurked close by. Maria often spoke of her daughter and her wish to find her. Darnford promised that together they would search for the child and start a new life where no one could call them criminals. In this fragile peace, Maria continued to write her memoir, the full story of her wrongs. She wrote how she had once believed in romantic love, only to learn that real affection must be rooted in equality. She described how society chained women by denying them education and independence, and how even virtue was turned into an instrument of their oppression. But happiness is seldom safe for long. One morning Jemima arrived with troubling news. Maria's husband, George Venables, had discovered her escape. He was furious, determined to reclaim her not out of love, but to preserve his property and pride. Maria and Darnford fled again, seeking refuge in a remote part of the country. For a short time they lived as if the world had forgotten them. Their days were filled with calm conversations and quiet walks. Maria's heart, long starved of affection, began to heal. She believed that love, though forbidden by law, was now her truest right. Yet fate had more trials in store. One evening, Darnford received a letter that shook him deeply. He had been accused of theft and madness, charges fabricated by Venables to bring him down. Soon afterward, Darnford disappeared. Maria waited in vain for his return, her heart sinking each day. When she tried to seek help, she was met only with fear and suspicion. Without protection or proof, she was again seized and brought before the law, accused of adultery and rebellion. The world that had never protected her now condemned her once more. Maria stood in court, calm but broken. Her husband claimed her fortune and called her insane. Her love, her pain, her truth, all were turned into evidence of guilt. The judges, all men, listened without understanding. Her words fell on deaf ears. But even as the verdict was pronounced, Maria did not beg for mercy. She looked up and said, "You can imprison my body again, but not my soul. I have learned to think, and thought is freedom." When she was taken away, Jemima wept silently. She knew that Maria's fight was not only her own, but every woman's, the fight to be treated as a human being, not as property. And so, once again, Maria was left alone, her story half told, her hopes wounded yet alive. In the solitude of her new confinement, she thought not of revenge but of justice. Justice for all women whose hearts had been broken by the cruelty of law and the blindness of custom. Her faith in humanity had been crushed, yet her spirit refused to die. She wrote her final words, "I have suffered the wrongs of woman, but I have also felt her strength. Let my story be a voice for those who cannot speak." After her second imprisonment, Maria felt a strange calm. She had been stripped of everything: her child, her freedom, her reputation. Yet inside, she felt stronger than before. The love she had known with Darnford had changed her. It had shown her that her heart was still capable of truth, even when the world called it sin. In the long days of solitude, Maria continued to write. Her pen became her only companion, her only weapon. She no longer wrote just for her daughter, but for every woman who had suffered under the tyranny of men. She wanted the world to see how laws and customs had turned women into slaves, denied education, independence, and the right to follow their own hearts. Jemima, now secretly working outside the asylum, had not forgotten her. She gathered every possible clue to find Maria's lost child. In time, her search led her to a poor household where a small girl lived under another name. Jemima's heart trembled when she saw the child's eyes. They were Maria's. While Jemima planned to reunite them, Darnford's fate took a darker turn. Falsely accused and abandoned by his friends, he fell into despair. Believing Maria lost forever, he gave in to hopelessness and died before he could see her again. When the news reached Maria, she did not scream or faint. She sat still, her face pale but peaceful. She whispered, "He is free now." That night she burned her letters from him, keeping only one lock of his hair close to her heart. Yet destiny had one last mercy left for her. Jemima returned, bringing the little girl to Maria's cell. The moment Maria saw her child, she knelt and pressed the small face to her own. Tears fell silently down her cheeks. She could hardly believe that life had granted her this final joy. Maria spent the following days in quiet peace. She held her daughter, told her stories, and watched her sleep. Jemima stayed with them, no longer the bitter servant she once was, but a friend, a sister born of suffering. Maria's writings were later found and published, speaking of the wrongs done to women and the hope for a better world. In them she wrote, "A woman's heart, like her mind, is not born for servitude. Give her freedom, and she will return truth for love, wisdom for respect. Deny her these, and you destroy the source of virtue itself." Her story became more than the tragedy of one woman. It became the voice of all who had been silenced. No one knows exactly how Maria's life ended. Some say she left the asylum with Jemima and her child, starting a quiet life in another country. Others believe she died soon after, her heart too weary to bear more loss. But what she left behind could not die, the truth she wrote and the courage she showed. Jemima raised the little girl with tenderness, teaching her the lessons her mother had written. She told her of Maria's strength, her love, and her fight for justice. And the child grew up knowing that her mother had not been mad. She had been brave. Maria's voice still echoes through her words. Love, when guided by reason, is not a weakness but the greatest strength of all. To feel deeply, to think freely, to live with truth. These are the rights of every woman. Thus ends the story of Maria, a woman wronged by man and by the world, yet never defeated. She lost everything, but her spirit remained pure and unbroken. Her story reminds us that freedom begins not with rebellion, but with the courage to say, "I am human too." Maria's story may have ended, but her voice still lives, a voice that speaks for every soul denied its right to love and to live free. If her journey touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more timeless stories that remind us how powerful the human spirit can be.